Hey there guys, Phoenix Aurelius here. Thank you for joining us for this May 2022 lab update report. There was a lot that happened in May. We'll just start at the top and kind of go in through it. So we finished 23 spagyric tinctures that were taken from their herbal tincturing phase, had salts added, salts filtered, removed. Those are now on the shelves, and most of them, I'd say the majority of them, at least 20 of them, are lined up to be spagyric of the month for the next multiple months. And we have like another 45 or 50 that I think are slated to be done over the next couple of months. So it's been very busy over here. In terms of tincture production, we also made a 2-gallon batch of cilantro spagyric tincture for Dr. Andrew Kaufman. And that should be available from his site here very soon. So for those of you who follow Medicamentum Authentica, he will have those available before too long. And I can't talk about it yet, but we have also engaged in research on another formulation that he's very interested in carrying, that we've been split testing, deciding how best to go about it over here. So that's been really fun, working with him, working with his team, and starting to create some new spagyric products for him and his line. We also started 6 new tinctures. We did 2 different split tests on grains of paradise, one with 35 grams, one with 65 grams per 450 mils of ethanol. 35 is what the intrinsic data field equipment basically said would be ideal, but when we actually tinctured it, it looked a little low, so I wanted to be able to double that amount and even go a little bit over that to what eyeball looked right to me. And then we will be able to test the medicinal efficacy of these things via IDF as well as organoleptics and a couple of split tests that we run here later when those things are finished. We also worked on grapeseed, red antler reishi, Chinese mugwort, and Chios mastic. So those were some fun ones. A lot of these will not be ones that make it to the Spagyrics of the Month club, but they will definitely be added to the apothecary when they are finished. We also ran some IDF investigations to determine the best ways to prepare some spagyric elixirs, and there were a few Enzistrale things that got in the way. Owen first had an Enzistrale Neptune issue, and then later an Enzistrale Saturn combined with an Enzistrale North Lunar Node issue that prevented us from continuing our research last month during the times that we had allotted to this, but we did come up with some very unique IDF investigations. In the past, what we've done is we've taken our spagyric elixirs that come fresh from the tincture, we evaporate them down, get them into a powder, dry them, and then we can apply them as granules, as powders. Now, typically, even with the amount of salts that we add to our tinctures, which are far more typically than what you get just from the plant itself, we still don't have enough to be able to sell elixirs, powdered elixirs of all of these things. First of all, we would have to measure them in grains or in micrograms, and selling a product like that is just kind of unfeasible, and it's hard to administer for the people on the other end who are buying it. But we were able to find out that we can, of course, reconstitute these things in water, which we've known for a long time. But traditionally, the way that we've talked about this, I've even done a podcast episode with Daniel Wiseman where he and I have talked about this, is that we bring it to a neutral pH. Well, in my experience, that actually causes the medicine to be far too subtle, and you end up having to take a lot more of it. And so this new intrinsic data field analysis indicates that we only need to add water to the elixir to bring it to an 11.5 pH, which is, as you know, very alkaline. That's very high. But that the elixir will not actually have the type of potency or the delivery available until we take that 11.5 elixir and then add that to either white wine or mead to a small glass, like even just a 1 ounce serving of these things, and then be able to shoot it down that way. That actually gets it both into the bloodstream as well as into the digestive tract and causes the elixir to work in the specific way that it's designed to work. So we're still far enough away from the finish line that I can't say that this works across the board with every single elixir, but we are close enough to being able to show that this is probably the most viable method of being able to take, use, and administer elixirs in the most proper way possible. So the research is still ongoing, but it is a very fascinating find, and it breaks from the tradition that a lot of us have kind of used and come from in the past, which, you know, after this many years of finding that many of the traditional sayings and techniques are not actually the best ways of going about the work, it's not surprising, but still, it's very interesting to see. In the month of May, we worked heavily on replenishing our salt supply. So we had like about 2 years here in Utah. We've had no burn bans pretty heavily throughout the entire state, and so being able to calcine a lot of our materials is very difficult. So what we've been doing is saving up all of our biomass over the last couple of years and waiting till such a time where we would be able to actually start a fire. So using just hardwood, we had a ton of Devil's Club as well. We created these huge fires, and then we just threw on pounds and pounds and pounds and pounds of spent herbs and calcined them all down. And we got probably 2.5 to 3 gallons of ash. And from that ash, now we're taking that ash and putting that into a kiln and roasting the ash at, you know, about 650 Celsius for as long as we can, constantly stirring until we get it as white as possible, and then performing successive leachings. And we have, as a standard here in the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy, at least 3 leachings with 20 times the volumetric amount of water as what we have to ash, and then filtering that, evaporating it all down, getting the salts from that, and we do that on the same quantity of ash 3 times, and then we do it with vinegar. That pulls out, largely that last vinegar pulls out a lot of potassium carbonate, but it also pulls out a small amount of potassium acetate, which we then have to rectify and get out of the product, because potassium acetate pyrolytically degrades at a much lower temperature than potassium carbonate does. And it also has other uses for us, including the creation of the oil of potassium, which can be used in the creation of Paracelsian spirit of wine, or spiritus vini Paracelsi is what we would call that. So we have lots and lots of work to do. The last time I did this, I was working with Niyama, is like 2015 or 2016 maybe. And I just spent weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks doing nothing but this, and that gave us enough salts for many years. And now, because we've been doing such huge production batches for a lot of different companies, we have run through that entire supply of salt, and so now we are rebuilding our supply of salt, and sadly to say, we are going through it at about the same rate that we can keep up with it lately, because we have such a huge demand, which is a good thing, but it's a growing pain. So working on salt's always a tough thing. They take a long time. We also, concerning running some salts, we encountered a never before seen issue, or at least I had never seen it before. It was an anomaly, technically, where after our salts were completely white, and there was no potassium acetate in them, we're just talking pure potassium carbonate, they were very white. There was maybe a little bit of yellow that needed to still be calcined and filtered out, as on the second or third leaching of some particular salts. Owen was working on these, and the salts turned black, and I had never seen anything like this before, especially once they're already white or already almost clear. They don't just do that, and we did not reach anywhere near the temperature that would cause them to start to pyrolytically decompose. So we started taking a look at it in intrinsic data field analysis to see if there was anything ancestrale-wise that might have contributed to or caused that issue. And sure enough, yes, it did. In fact, it was a combination of ancestrale Saturn with North Lunar Node that actually ended up causing this issue, causing a breakdown of the way that not only nutrients would be absorbed, but also the way that they would behave. So this is another case of energy transference that we've been able to see inside of the laboratory with individual operators that have ancestrale versus the materials that they work on, and various anomalies that can be seen. So that was really fun, really cool to document. We were able to leach those salts out, and a lot of the blackness was able to come out during the filtration phase. And with just a couple of, by addressing the ancestrale issue and then just continuing to work on it in the lab, we were eventually able to get those salts white, so it was not a complete waste. We didn't have to throw the salts out or anything. So it's just an interesting anomaly, and something that we would like to add to the repertoire of alchemical experiences that people could possibly have. And if your salts turn black when you're working on them, then it's a very good chance that you probably have a combination of both Enzestrali Saturn, and North Lunar Node. Or at least that's the only time that we've seen it so far. There may be other contributing things that can cause that as well. We also prepared a lot of spagyrizomal and liposomal vitamin C here in the month of May, particularly near the end of May. Most of May, we were unable to even get sunflower lecithin, organic sunflower lecithin, and so we weren't even certain that we would be able to produce any of this. But each year, we stopped shipping our liposomal and spagyrizomal products on June 21st or thereabouts, right around the summer solstice, and we don't ship it again until after the fall equinox. And the reason is that we don't like making this really awesome, pristine product that ideally should be refrigerated to just sit around in hot delivery vehicles over the summertime and get the opportunity to be ruined. And it's so labor intensive for us to make this. We can only make about 50 bottles in a 48-hour period. So for us, if a product goes bad, it's not just like, oh, we'll just put another one out in the mail and it's no big deal. It's like, it actually is a big deal. It takes a lot of time and effort to be able to create these things. So we stopped shipping them. So we started building up all of our supplies. We are currently very well stocked. We were able to get more organic sunflower lecithin right at the 11th hour, May 31st, in fact. We ended up getting our shipment of that. So we have just been completely cranking it out and trying to keep up. And this is just a good reminder that if you want any liposomal or spagyrizomal C over the summer, you better buy it now, because we do not make it even under special request in the summer months, primarily because of that shipping issue. And we found that it does affect the quality of the product. So be sure to stock up now, and we have plenty of supply available, but we will stop shipping, a very hard stop shipping date on June 21st. Let's see. Also, in terms of other anomalies that we've seen, I started working with a woman who has a very, very rare condition. It's called Zollinger-Ellison syndrome. And basically, it's where a gastronoma forms. It's a syndrome where a gastronoma forms in the duodenum of the small intestine right near the stomach. And this particular gastronoma ends up producing a tremendous amount of the hormone called gastrin, and sending this hormone out that tells the stomach to produce a ton of stomach acid. So people with this very rare syndrome, it's like 1 in a million people have it, according to like most modern medical resources, it ends up creating so much stomach acid throughout the entire intestines that they have stomach ulcers like crazy, small intestine ulcers like crazy, and usually also ulcerative colitis. This woman had all 3 of them, and we were able to, through IDF analysis and investigation, be able to find out that this particular individual also has a related gene that about 25% of people with Zollinger-Ellison syndrome has. It's a mutation in a gene called MEN1 or menin1. And menin is a hormone that suppresses the growth of tumors. And so by being able to work on this, we have seen in a very short period of time, now I'm giving like 22 hours a day of concentrated broadcast to this individual, but in a very short period of time, we've been able to see that the intrinsic data field readings of both the Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, as well as the ulcers themselves, as well as the MEN1 polymorphism / mutation, and the ME1 gene wellness as a whole, have entirely rerouted themselves, and they're all very much so way outside of the risk threshold. So this does not yet equate for this individual that I'm working with to a complete lack of symptoms, but we're not certain that this is all that that individual is undergoing as well. This was just one of the main things that this individual was going through, and something that I'd never worked on before. And to see that the intrinsic data field responded absolutely so well to these broadcasts in this particular protocol was very encouraging, because at present moment, the only thing that exists are proton pump inhibitors to help decrease the amount of stomach acid. So hopefully down the line, if this case study works the way that I anticipate that it will, we will end up seeing that there might be new ways of addressing this in the future. And that's a very exciting thing. Also, we ended up blending up over 210 gallons of finished compost. We take our compost very seriously here. We don't just, go grab some manure, or go grab some green compost or whatever and just put it on the soil and hope for the best. It is very, very precise in its biochemical formulation. And we were only able to get green compost and steer manure and bokashi compost that we have composted ourselves. And so we had to use all of these materials along with about 15 other different amendments ranging from like crab shell and oyster shell and gypsum, azomite, andesite as a paramagnetic material, and all sorts of other different types of things, and blend them together. So 210 gallons is really quite a significant amount. We still have to put this onto the garden. A lot of these went into contractor bags to be able to mature for a couple of weeks to let all of the amendments and the microbes go ahead and set in, but it's all been inoculated with archaea and fungi, specifically endo and ecto mycorrhizae. And there's a few other things in there, and of course it will all be sprayed down with spagirazyme by the time that we're done. So that was really cool. And along with that, we started blending that up because we had new varieties of herbs that needed to be planted, including a few new varieties of lavender and so on and so forth. And all of these new varieties, as they become available in the laboratory, will be marked. So we may have multiple different lavender products by the time everything hits the shelves, but they will be different types of lavender, just even French and English lavender, and breaking those up into their different subcategories is very important because they all have slightly different uses, the way that they grow and the different types of chemical constituents that they contain are going to lend themselves to different medicinal effects as opposed to others. So this is really cool for us because it's being able to help people understand and have access to subgroups of various different types of items of pharmacopoeia that they may be aware of, and realize that even the slightest little difference in the way that the plant grows can have enormous ramifications on the medicinal uses of that particular plant. I also set up a new smithing forge. Last year I started engaging in bladesmithing, and I've purchased all my own smithing supplies now. And so we have propane forge, we also have a coal forge, we've got our anvils and our hammers and lots of different types of tools, and before long I'll be actually hammering out even more tools like hide scrapers and a wide number of other different types of things, tent pegs, all sorts of stuff that we need for the garden, for the home, for camping trips, for bushcrafting adventures and all sorts of stuff, as well as starting to hammer out some ritual athames, as well as various different types of bushcrafting blades and other types of things like that. A lot of them will be for ceremonial use and will be infused with various plants, plant extracts, plant ashes, etc., to be able to create some really unique items that can be used for ritual use. So keep an eye out for that in the near future. As a quick update, I am currently unavailable for all wellness-related questions and emails. So even if it's a question like, hey, I have this kind of condition, what type of spagyric would you suggest that I take for this? I'm completely unable to answer all of those for the time being. The reason is that a lot of that takes up my time, and we have such an insane production schedule over the summer that I'm not able to keep up with all of those. And so for the meantime, if you have questions like that, I want you to go online, do your own research. I have this condition, what herbs are available? Once you find what herbs are available, then go over to our apothecary and see if we have spagyric tinctures of any of those herbs. And if so, and you have a question about that, then go ahead and let us know, and then we can answer that and say, oh yeah, this herb traditionally is good for this type of thing. This spagyric preparation contains these types of chemicals that would also make it available for use. So we can do that, but we can't be answering questions like, hey, I've got stage 3 cancer, what herbs do you suggest or recommend? Like that, first of all, we're not even supposed to be answering or responding to emails like that. It's technically illegal for us to do so, but more importantly, I simply just don't have the time to be able to do that. And I'm also not offering wellness consultations at this time, and haven't been for many months, because those take up so much time that it's unfeasible for me to complete all of the other things and engage in the research and train the employees and everything else that we need to do around here. So for the time being, we're unavailable for all of those things. And the last thing is, even though it's not this month, it's coming up at the end of July, we are going to the Good Medicine Confluence, and not only are we just going, I will be presenting, and we also have a booth there, a vendor booth there. So I'm very excited about this. Good Medicine Confluence is probably the most prestigious collection of herbalists throughout the entire country. It's one of the very best events. And it's been talked about for many, many years as being probably the best and most highbrow event that herbalists can possibly go to. And not just herbalists, but people from all around the spectrum concerning healing. And I will be giving two presentations. I'm not sure if they've updated the website with this information yet, but I'll be presenting one on Spagyria and its entire use as an entire medicinal art form of the West. And I'm very, very excited to give this presentation because when most people hear spagyrics, they think about making a simple spagyric tincture and think that that's the basis of it. And that is not even 1/100 millionth of it. So we'll be presenting a very wide array of actual Paracelsian Spagyria and what will come to be known as Aurelian Spagyria as well. And I will also be presenting on the 5 entia of disease and why it is so important and how, as herbal practitioners and just as holistic practitioners, how we can incorporate the 5 entia of disease into our practices in order to create a much wider scope of what is impacting the individual and get right to the root cause of what the heart of the problem is. So we have a lot of preparation to do to get ready for that festival and for our vendor booth and other things like that, but it will be a good time. So all of these things happen in May. I'm sure there's probably more, like always, but those were some of the key highlights. I always want to thank you guys so much for supporting our work, supporting our research here at the Phoenix Aurelius Research Academy. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to let us know by emailing us at support@phoenixaurelius.org. And in the meantime, thank you again so much for your support. Have a great summer.